I would like people to learn to think critically, especially at this time, because that's the reason people end up in trouble. When they lose their powers of discernment, their ability to critically think, to question things, and to trust their own innate wisdom and not allow themselves to be dictated to by a power outside of themselves.
The episode you're about to watch has been republished. My podcast channel reaches a lot more people now, and there's certain episodes that have slipped under the radar, and I wanted to bring them up for your attention because I truly feel they are worth listening to. So please be sure to let me know what you think of this episode in the comments below. And of course, let's continue to connect. Let me know where you are in the world and where you're listening and tuning in from. I love reading it. It's amazing, isn't it, that we can do this? And the other thing I want to say as well is find out where we are if you want to put your spiritual boots on and come and join us at one of our 5-day retreats or one-day events around the world. Links are below as well if you want to find out more what we're up to. Much love from me. Enjoy.
There we go. Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Guy. Thanks for having me.
Deeply appreciate it. It's funny, we're not that far apart, and here we are on technology.
Yeah.
The world we live in.
Yeah.
I love to ask everyone on the show, starting out, if let's say we were at an intimate dinner party and you were sat next to a complete stranger and they got talking to you and asked you what you did for a living these days, what would you say?
I can never answer that question properly. I feel my answer is just ridiculous. Would anyone take it seriously? So I teach meditation, but you hardly think that that's a job or something that you can actually learn a living doing. But anyway, that's what I'm predominantly do, teach meditation.
Yeah, beautiful. What led you into that? Because like you say, predominantly, how do you make a living out of that in the first place? What's your story? What got you into sort of leaning into this work? Have you always wanted to explore these concepts since a child? Because I find that quite often when I speak to guests. Or was it just a gradual breakdown to breakthrough kind of thing?
I think I was always from a very young age, I was always very interested in things of a deeper nature. And I didn't really have context for that. I didn't have any sort of informal teachers or instructors or anything like that. But my mum was very spiritual, and she fostered that in us boys. She had 3 sons. And yeah, I think I was always like looking inward and trying to understand like the nature of existence and myself, and get in touch with something more profound than, what we experience just with our 5 senses.
Yeah.
So I was very, very, very deep thinker as well. And I think I thought too deeply as a kid that I got myself into a bit of a mess. I didn't really know the answers to the questions I was proposing. And so I remember feeling a little bit afraid. And so I stopped asking those questions and forgot about spirituality for a little while. And then I guess when I was probably in my late teens, I really began in earnest again to kind of connect spiritually with myself, and then I fell into a bit of drama and grief, and I got in trouble, and then that kind of led me to really pick up a meditation practice, and
right.
And then I met my.
What age was this
Yeah.
when you started to get into the dramas in life?
When I was 21, is when I really started to change my life. I learned meditation, and then I had this huge shift in
At
basically
21?
how I was living my 21. Yeah, I remember feeling like I wished I'd learned it 10 years earlier, but I know a lot of people think, God, that was so young. So I think I learned a formal practice, and I then came under the tutelage of a great master, a great teacher, and I studied a long time with him and spent a lot of time with him, and that really revolutionized my whole understanding of myself, the world, and how to fit in, and what I should be directing my time, my energy towards.
Wow.
So it was like 21 was a massive turning point, and I guess it's been a pretty special journey ever since then.
Yeah, incredible. And what was your day job? Like, were you working at the time, or did you like go overseas to India to study under a guru or something? Like, how did you fit that into your Western life? Because some people just kind of pack their bags and disappear for a year or two.
Yeah, and I was planning to do that. That was my grand plan when I was 20. I thought, all right, I need a guru, I need a teacher. I'm just gonna let go of my life, and I'm gonna go renounce everything and live in India, and I'm gonna do the classical, find a guru, sit at the feet and just absorb whatever I need to absorb. So I was fully prepared to do that.
Wow.
And then when I was 21, I actually met Tom Knowles, who also is known as Maharishi Vyasananda, and he's a great master, but a householder. So he taught me that, there is a way to integrate and not have to withdraw from society and, all of the things that modern existence offers. You don't have to renounce that. You can actually be fully, integrated and be woven into everyday material existence, yet be having a real spiritual experience within the midst of that. And that was kind of quite revelationary for me, because all the books that I was reading and the masters I was interested in were renunciates. They were classic people who had no interest in worldly sort of affairs or families and things like that for the main part. They were more just directed towards their own personal spiritual quests. And my teacher at that time, he's got 10 kids now. Then he had about 7 or so.
10.
So yeah, a lot of kids. And so he was the embodiment of, no, this is integrated householder, grahasta living.
Yeah, wow, incredible. So there's a couple of directions that sparked me in straight away. Is most people are not familiar with a guru or having a master and someone to speak to. How do you define the wisdom of those teachers that are passed through into your life? Because I do find it fascinating, and I grapple with this in my own life sometimes. There's a part of me that just thinks I just want to retreat from the world, like it's getting uglier and uglier, and I want to bury myself in the hills of Byron Bay, grow some veg, and just shut off from the world. But then there's another aspect of me going, wow, now more than ever, there needs to be a message. I've learned enough to know that I can pass on some wisdom in my life to generations that are coming through at the same time. So I kind of battle with this in my own world as well, if you like, so.
Yeah, definitely. And there is that idea that, the yogis will withdraw, and, there's these enlightened beings that are sitting far away from society, and people could argue, well, they're not making any contribution. Like, how are they standing on the front lines opposing, the rise of communist Australia or whatever it may be? But then you realize that these people are silently supporting creation, upholding the fabric of consciousness and emanating a lot of their own strength and support in a subtle manner. So I think everyone plays their role, and at different stages of your life, you might feel drawn to, dive right in and then withdraw completely. And so I've gone through similar phases, but what I've learned to do is just trust whatever the energy is calling from within me to participate in. And sometimes it is to engage, and other times it is just to work on self, elevate myself, create that influence within my immediate sphere of influence. And then, that can be powerful in itself. And if everyone did that, if everyone was, nurturing, cultivating higher consciousness, the world would never be able to descend into misery.
Yeah, but it's a very hard concept to wrap your mind around if you haven't thought about it in those terms in any shape or form. Like I can only go from my own journey, because I was, there was just my life as a Welsh rugby player, drinking beer and not even seeing a yoga not even seeing a yoga studio in Wales at the time growing up. And like I never went to church. I never had religion. I never had any kind of framework or anything. I was kind of just left to my own devices. And slowly, I guess my heart took me to the teachings and wisdom of the very things that you talk about. But it took me a long time to get there. And then, I got smacked over the head, and it's like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
what's going on, where listening to you, like you it's quite incredible that to me, in my mind, you at 21 looking at this work is just blows my mind, honestly, when I only have my own lens to compare it to.
Yeah. Well, I think what you suffered from was a cultural thing where we don't have a structure which the next generation can gain enlightenment or can accelerate their personal development or the development of their mind and understanding. Because basically, we get engendered into a philosophy and a belief system. And this is why, like, the Vedic culture, the Indian culture is like so exquisite, because it has this deep understanding that there's this more profound element to life that most other cultures, aren't really tapping into. Not only, do they have spiritual foundations, but they have all these systems and, ways and means and rituals to help others become like devotees of that element of life. You want to call it something like a spiritual devotion. And it just seems like that has been corrupted over time. But from my experience with the Vedic knowledge is it's still got its purity intact.
Right.
And that's the role of a guru, to act as like someone that is a catalyst for growth, change, to accelerate their personal evolution. Because it's like someone else can do it on their own, but could you imagine trying to learn, the English language, or learn about maths, or discover, what are the elements that exist in nature? It's way easier if someone just teaches you that.
Yeah.
So this idea of our schooling system is the same, that we have these people who have knowledge, people who don't have that knowledge, and then they rapidly acquire it through an education system. So that's the role of a guru, to create, I guess, a mental and physical and spiritual unfolding.
Which can be
And-
terrifying in some respects. I again, just referring to my own journey, when there was, my identity started breaking down, even when I was talking to you off air about how I sold out of my company, like that was a huge transition, and starting to trust something greater than myself, and that I'm actually following my inner compass now, and not actually what the outside world is, I guess, perceive and dictate to me on who I should be and how I should present myself. And in that space, it's like, like this fragile sprout, coming through, and so I can see where the teachings and the masters and people there, because obviously I had my own support when coming through that transition myself. When you were 21, did it feel like that for you, or was it because you had a foundation with your mother, saying, like you said, she was very spiritual, that allowed you to have a smooth transition? Did you work in fashion? Did I hear that somewhere?
Yeah. I used to. I worked in television, in film,
really?
and I also had a fashion label as well. So I was working freelance and juggling a lot of different things, and I was getting pretty burned out, pretty stressed out, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what led me on my quest to pick up a meditation practice, because I realized I was not headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
I just wasn't feeling good to be in my skin.
And then at what point did you decide have you stepped away from all that, or do you still entrepreneurially have multiple businesses and things going on? Or you just like kind of?
Yeah, I guess like my mum, she worked in welfare, and she was very selfless, and she was very much into spirituality and wisdom, and living a very conscious life, and making a contribution. My dad was a real entrepreneur, and he was very, I guess, interested in forging his own path, not conforming to society. And so I've taken on both of those, I guess, ways of approaching life.
Yeah.
So I think I've got this creative entrepreneurial side, but I've also got this deep devotion to, higher consciousness. So I think my life tends to reflect that now. Like I've got a retreat, and I'm quite good at integrating the both needs of life, the physical, material, and the inner spiritual aspect, or whatever you'd like to refer to it as, like creating that harmony and balance.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I run a retreat, and I do a lot of coaching work, personal development work with people. I work with football teams. I work with kids. I do a lot of work of different kinds, but mostly you could say it's psychological.
Yeah, fair enough. And yeah, it's because there's always a subtle trap. I'll never forget interviewing, I can't remember who it was on there, and he said, yeah, because most people I'm talking to are in similar fields to you, or in the health space and everything. And he said, yeah, all this wellness is making me sick, where he was just like pushing, and like there's definitely a subtle art to finding that balance, isn't there? It's very easy to stray. But
yeah, you got to have a good inner compass, like you were talking about before. That's the only way I can do what I do, is just really practicing deep listening, tuning into myself and where the energy of life is kind of ushering me to go, and I never override that. And so that's how I've been able to sustain, the high level of what I do and the integrity of what I do, because everything can be corrupted. We know power corrupts, money corrupts, all these things corrupt. So the same thing when you're someone who's in a position where other people look to you for something, it would be very easy to manipulate or take advantage of that. So I make sure that I'm always just in integrity. Am I representing this tradition, this lineage, which I'm part of? Am I playing my role? Am I genuinely supporting people? Am I in integrity and authenticity each day of my life? And that's the most important thing to me.
Yeah, no, beautiful. What do you find, where are people at when they come to see you? Because it seems to be quite a diverse, like you said, football teams for start. You work with football teams. Like, what would you be doing with a football team to say somebody that's just burning out, struggling,
Yeah, I guess a mixed bag. When I first started teaching, stress was the huge feature.
Okay.
And, people would come because they're struggling with stress, anxiety, or insomnia, or they're feeling, really down and out, or their professional burnout, whatever it may be. And now I'm like, over time, I've noticed that there's an extension happening. Like, people are growing increasingly curious about, is there more to life? How do I tap into a deeper part of myself? How do I really get to know who I am? How do I bring more meaning, significance, purpose to existence? And I think there's been this enormous proliferation and growth and awareness around meditation itself. And I think mastering the art has been something that people struggle with, but the awareness is there. And I feel there's just like a longing, because the world is changing dramatically. When I learned to meditate, you couldn't really talk publicly about it without being shamed or laughed at. And it's something that you couldn't really share with even your close friends, because they'd think you've gone off the rails.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's so different. And there is like this amazing consciousness revolution happening, where there's so much enthusiasm for people doing the inner work and exploring different aspects of themselves and life, and all the different kind of layers of truth, and getting in touch with what is reality, where is fulfillment, how do I remain whole and happy in this world that seems obsessed with stuff. And so I think there's a big quest for deeper understanding, and there's a hell of a lot of ignorance on the planet, which there always has been, but I feel there's this rise in this interest to grow and evolve for people.
Massively. And not that I'm expecting you to solve the world's problems in a podcast or anything, but what do you make of the last 18 months, 2 years of what's been happening? What's your take on it? Because that's actually how I discovered you, believe it or not. My dear friend Fiona Chadwick, I don't know if you know Fiona, but she shared a video of you speaking on a Facebook Live when everything, and I was like, wow, this guy talks about sense. And then I started following you from that day forward.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a tough one. Like, I think I would start with just saying that there is this thing called life. There is this power, this sacred force, and we're all in its embrace. We come into this planet, we come into these bodies, and we start to participate in this thing called human existence. And there does seem to be a deeper power which is conducting the flow of all things. And so as a human being, sometimes you can think, well, why is this happening? And this isn't fair, and this is wrong. And so I always like to come back to, well, this is what life's doing. And we either have to trust life has intelligence and wisdom and intent and purpose as part of its nature, or life is just chaotic and random and nothing really makes sense, and we better just somehow inoculate ourselves against the chaos. Or we can realize the chaos has a purpose. The chaos is there to generate growth and awakening, because how does anyone ever really grow or evolve if it's not for the weight of pressure and suffering? Like, suffering's an amazing teacher, one of the best. And I think it's one of the teachers that always creates movement, because no one tends to grow or make changes when they're comfortable. So people who have a really deep connection with their internal like energies will know when there's a shift in that, and then they'll start to adjust. But a lot of people aren't really in touch with that. They're more kind of outwardly directed. So meanwhile, while the internal energies are saying, you know, make change, make change, make change, and they don't, then the world starts to say, well, we're going to have to start to be the voice for that. And so external life can start to be challenging and fall apart and do all those sorts of things. And then you get to a point where, okay, I've got to do something now. I have to act, because now I've got a sore back, or I've got a disease, or my marriage is falling apart, or whatever it may be. But no marriage falls apart like that, or no one gets injured generally just like that. There's all these precursors that we're not paying attention to. So I feel that, you know, as a collective, we're going through like a mass initiation into, I think, a higher truth or a deeper understanding. And I have to say that I have my opinions, personal opinions about what's going on, and I'm happy to share those. But I was very disheartened at various points along the way, thinking, what is wrong with people? Can't they not see like the reality before their very eyes? Why is everyone like so full of fear and this and that? And then I was looking at what the government was doing and thinking, wow, I'm really losing faith in this great country of mine. And humans can be so gullible sometimes and so easily directed just with like a headline or, you know, something, some announcement. And so what I've seen in more recent weeks is this massive uprising of people actually starting to use their own discriminatory logic, discernment, and critical thinking, which seems so absent at the beginning. And I'm like, wow, okay, so sometimes we just have to keep the camera rolling. And from the darkness can come goodness, can come like these huge shifts. And so I feel like what humanity is going through won't make full sense until we're a little bit further down the road, and then we can reflect back and go, okay, this is what was born of that.
Yeah.
And it could go either way, certainly. But it's certainly a lot of psychological warfare happening. This is it.
Yeah, it's an incredible
pretty unique
time, isn't it? It's an incredible time,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm.
Again, you sparked a couple of thoughts within all that, because I've noticed in myself, like you say, we talk about the collective energy. There's been moments when the collective energy of fear is impalpable, like there's no escaping it, and you're like, oh my God, this feels absolutely suffocating, you know. And I'm curious to know, because what do you do? And I think this will be really beneficial for listeners. You know, how do you bring in a snapshot of how do you manage that in your personal life? Because we're all fallible. We can all fall from grace daily. You know what I mean? And like, what have been some of your key, I guess, rituals or things in your life that allow you to stand in your own truth while chaos is happening externally?
Yeah, for me, it's having a daily practice that allows you to transcend. And by that, I mean to transcend means to move or go beyond. So we could understand that most of the time people are living in their thought forms. You know, their mind tends to govern and absorb their energy, their focus. And so I meditate each and every day, a couple of times, morning and you know, evening. And so that allows me to withdraw myself, and it lets my body defrag and release whatever friction or tension or artifacts of life might have, you know, been acquired. And so I can clear myself in body and mind every day. So keep my spirit strong and keep myself really anchored and grounded in myself. So it means that fear and confusion and uncertainty and just the weight of, you know, life, it doesn't get embedded and it doesn't take over. So for me, like that is one of my real critical things. And I've done that ever since I was 21. And I think I've benefited massively just from having that daily regimen, daily routine. And the other things that I do are just pay attention to life. That's it. Pay attention to inner and outer life, and just really doing all I can to remain present in the moment and attune to what's alive and awake and moving in me, and also what's happening outside. So I'm always trying to harmonize those two worlds and just monitoring myself moment to moment. What's happening now? Where am I at? and just where am I at mentally with my awareness? How's my body? How's my breathing? Am I on the path or off the path? So I kind of feel like there's like a tightrope that we walk, and it's maybe it's not as narrow as a tightrope walker, but it feels like there is this dharmic path. And when we're really living in the way that our individuality is intended to be living, we feel a sense of grace, a feeling of lightness, a feeling of purpose and belonging. And then when we deviate, for me, I notice I feel a little bit off and I feel a little bit uncomfortable. And the cues can be just really subtle, but the more I deviate, the more those cues get heavier. So I'm always just navigating and just checking in, where am I at? How are we tracking? Am I doing this well? Am I on course? Is this right? Should I, just staying in touch with that guidance and just really moment to moment, just staying in harmony.
Yeah. Yeah, no, beautiful. I always remember my old mentor used to say to me, he'd always have a guide, like true meditation is what you do with your eyes open during the day. Be present,
Yeah.
check in.
Yeah.
And there's so many distractions now in life. Like, God, no wonder we don't know ourselves.
Yeah. No. And I feel like I'm pretty lucky that I've got a forest on my property, and I'm just communing with that and getting to know, the natural world more and more and more. And that's a real incredible source of enlightenment for me, is that world is just so deep, so present, and there's all different energies that you experience when you're there. And just the wonder of being in the natural world is something that I'm finding deeper and deeper affection for. Yeah.
I ask you a deep question for a moment, but do you think life is meant to be a struggle, or do you feel life is meant to be of joy, bliss, and harmony, or somewhere in between? I'm curious to know, because I ponder this myself. I'll never forget going to a weekend workshop, and there was a guru that they'd flown into town, and I'd never been in a guru. It was quite funny, Gary, because I was the only one. I was in there sitting there in my CrossFit gear and my singlet, and everyone was dressed in all their white gear and everything, and I felt like a real anomaly. But I really connected with this guy, and the whole weekend he kept cracking jokes, and he was a joy to be around. Like, he truly was. And it completely changed my perception of what I didn't know anyway. You know what I mean? Because you make up your belief system. So coming away from that, I was like, wow, that's completely, that sort of challenged my old paradigm. But anyway, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think all gurus are different. Some have this incredible lightness of heart, and others can be, because everyone has a different personality, and just because someone gains enlightenment doesn't mean their personality disappears.
Right.
So we find that generally there is a lightness of heart and a playfulness to realize masters, because they've broken through the illusion that life is, this big serious ordeal. They realize it's a play of consciousness, and they're, in the world, but really not in this world. This world is a dance to the senses and to the mind, and so they can be more lighthearted and humanist and playful in it. So, because life's regarded as being like a lila in the Vedic view, like it means a sport or a game.
Okay, lila.
Yeah, lila. Yeah. So it's interesting. So we're all players, and we're all playing this sport, and some people are so caught up in the game that they forget they're playing a game and that they should be having fun.
Yeah.
So I think, like, to answer your question, I think life is joy and struggle, and it depends on which level of life you're living from. So if you find life has three different layers to it, there's the superficial, there's the surface of life, where there's all the matter and the dance of all the different forms, and then you have beneath that there's an energetic field, and then beneath that there's a field of infinite, pure unboundedness, what's known as, in Taoism, as the Tao, in Vedic science as Brahman, or Atma, or this pure field without content. So when you're in touch with that field, you're in a state of bliss. But if you're disconnected from that field and you're living on the surface of life, life is very mercurial because we have night and day, light and dark, birth and death. So that realm of life is full of contrast. And I feel that one of the great mechanisms that creation uses to get people to go into that field of the void is to make life unbearable, uncomfortable, and difficult, because it causes us to turn inward and ask deeper questions and look for answers and promote the change that we need in order to not suffer anymore. So suffering, as we mentioned, is a very unique teaching tool, and it triggers us to seek a way beyond suffering. And then we start to seek out God. For some people, that word is very evocative, but we start to seek out something which is, is vast and powerful and is supreme. And we look more to the source of life, and we're in touch with the source. The quality of that it brings is this feeling of comfort, joyfulness, ease, trust, inner stability. And then I think when you're grounded in that, then you can enjoy the play and you can enjoy the waves of life. And so it's really about being anchored in your inner being, being anchored in that field. And then that brings this joyfulness, or it brings this capacity to enjoy the ways of life. Because often we think, why is life doing this? This is not fair or fun, or I want something other than this. But the surface of life isn't designed to be like that. It's never meant to be flat, like a mirror, like the ocean, just flat and dull and non-activity, because that's not life on that express level. Life on the express level is change, is fluctuation, is dynamic. And if you look at it another way, it's impermanent. Like nothing lasts or remains on that level of life as it is for very long, whether it be someone's health or fame or wealth or whatever it may be. There's a time limit to all of that.
Totally. Yeah.
And even like someone, I feel good today. Well, okay, let's see how you feel tomorrow. Am I the same? Well, I might have changed, because that's what the physical body's always doing. But there's something that remains, that's permanent, and that it has lots of different names. And it's that we need to get in touch with. And that's the joy of doing that. Is the reward for doing that is this feeling of wholeness and joyfulness.
Yeah, no, beautiful explanation. I remember interviewing Mark Devine. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's an ex-Navy SEAL, very conscious, incredible human being. And we were talking about it all, and and I think we've heard it many times, but he summed it up that suffering is a form of separation. And I always think about that, and I never really understood it. But when I think about I always say source energy now. What gives rise to the human. The more I stray from that, the more I normally end up in my protective egoic self, and that's when the judgments and stories come in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, on your journey, why did you decide to then lean into retreats? And you've gone and set up a retreat center. I don't know if the timing was perfect with everything that happened in the world, but what's been your journey there?
Yeah, I started to teach meditation, was working, one-to-one with people, and then working with groups. And then I'd done many retreats during my time with my teacher, and it just felt like a natural progression. So I started running retreats, and they were enormously popular. And I started doing retreats locally in Australia, and then I started to do them abroad, mostly in Bali. And you just realize when you can capture someone and hold them in a space and immerse them in a process and experience, the change you get is extraordinary. Because like peppering in practice amidst all of the other demands of life, it's like the spiritual practice will take you forward 3 steps, and then life will sort of take you back 2. So the momentum that you get is stifled somewhat, whereas when you do it retreat, it's a massive acceleration. And so I loved holding that space, challenging people, and watching the transformation they go through. And giving them techniques which are, very, very powerful and effective, and letting them engage them for, many, many days, whether it be 5 days, 7 days. Bali itself was a 7-day retreat. So I think you can, I'm always wanting to help people as much as I possibly can. And when you look at what you can do with someone in like an hour consult, or, over the course of a half day or whatever it may be, you can do a lot. But there's so much more you can achieve when you're like, okay, cool. You're captive, you're here, you come, in with deep intention, and here are the techniques, so let's just practice them day in, day out, day in, day out. So for me, that was kind of the pinnacle for me. Like that's what I can imagine is the most high and sustainable and achievable thing for people, because you can't always take someone away for 3 months or 6 months or whatever it may be, but you can do these, these week-long intensives, or, reasonably long intensives that allows them to then take that back to their life and feel the effects, and then do a daily practice to support its continued unfolding. So retreats are just like a wonderful way. It's like it's like being a DJ and having just human beings to, to help, trigger to have different experiences. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's something about taking oneself out of your current environment that's constantly reaffirming who you think you are. And then when you put them in a completely different environment with completely different people, that in itself can be transformative, let alone the practices that come with it.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. And I mean, this place has a lot of power, just the energy itself, and then all of the techniques that you practice here. And like you said, sometimes just not doing the things that you always do allows time for reflection and revelation to happen, and also just letting go of bad habits. I remember one guy came in a Bali retreat and he said, Gary, if the only thing I got here was just no phone, no emails, and no demands or pressure from all my everyday life, he said, that would be enough. He said, but I also got all these other stuff, but man, just eating good food and going to bed on time. He said that would be powerful enough. And that wasn't even really part of the program at all. It was just something that happens. Of course, you eat good food and you're rising at the right times and going to bed at the right times.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And what inspired you then to do your own retreat center itself? Because I guess it'd be kind of easy to continue to, hire other places and venues and things. But you've created something very special here up in Byron Bay. What was the rationale behind that?
The motivation was I'd always had this thing inside me saying, you'll have a retreat someday, and so for years I'd been dreaming about it and collecting different things and include things I would include when one day I would have one. So I always knew that it was somewhere there, and I think it was born of a few different needs. One, that there is a need for this work on the planet. There is a need for the space we've created, and I think we need a lot of these in the world. But I didn't find any that I really liked and that were set up right. A lot of things are created and then someone buys them and goes, oh, okay, we'll just have to make this place work. So, you don't find anything that was like a blank canvas that had a retreat in mind, and a retreat that's appealing as well. Because a lot of places that I've sort of heard about, I wouldn't go to them personally because they don't match my sense of like aesthetic. They don't kind of have programs that I feel are like anchored in ancient lineage and culture and are deeply like authentic and spiritually efficacious. So I kind of felt like there wasn't really much out there that I was drawn to or impressed by, so I'll just do it myself. And me and my brother, and he created the look of the place, and he was instrumental. And then one of my clients, who's also one of my best friends, he's my my partner on Soma, and so it just seemed like life did it. Really, I just was the midwife helping to bring it into the world.
Enough. Yeah, no, it's a hell of an achievement, mate. I really congratulations on what you're doing. It's incredible.
Yeah, thank you.
It's funny because I watched 9 Perfect Strangers with my wife, and I actually had no idea it was filmed at Soma, and then somebody told me, and I was like, oh, I had a grand tour of your place, because I just wanted to watch it
Yeah.
just because it was the retreat industry, and I was curious to see how it was portrayed and what came out of it. But yeah, I found it fascinating.
Yeah. We're very fortunate that to have those guys here, and the timing as well, because it was just at the start of COVID.
Yeah.
And we weren't running wouldn't have been running many retreats,
Yeah. But everything's starting to open up for you now there?
Yeah, we're back rolling again, which is good.
Yeah, fantastic. Gary, I ask a few questions on the show that I ask every week, and I'm always curious to know what comes out of them. But one I like to ask people is, what's been a low point in your life that you can reflect upon later that's been a blessing? What springs to mind?
Yeah, when I was 21. Yeah, when I was 21. Yeah. Burned out, stressed out, lost, didn't know how to fix things. And that's when, I found the practice and the path, and that changed everything. And I see that that's kind of like why life put me there, because that was exactly the shift I needed to make. I needed to turn a corner, and I wouldn't have been able to do that unless I struggled like majorly.
Really,
so I feel that was like one of the greatest blessings, that suffering that I endured.
Yeah, beautiful. What does your morning routine look like?
It varies, because I've got a couple of kids, and but they move between me and their mum. So it varies, but I generally, wake up early. I do the Ayurvedic routine often, scrape my tongue, brush my teeth, have a cleansing drink of water. We'll often do Abhyanga, which is the oil massage. And then I'll do a long meditation, and then generally eat something healthy and start my day.
Yeah.
If the surf's great, then I prioritize that, and I'll go and surf, and and I'll meditate on the beach or whatever it may be. So I try to kind of keep my life moving. I don't like to be sort of locked in, but meditation's always there. That's definitely like a non-negotiable. It's something that I always do each and every day. And other times I'll do, breath work and Kriya sets, and I try to spend a portion of my day just in Holy Communion, just getting in touch with the natural world, because, my land here is very, very beautiful. I'm on 22 acres. So I try to make sure that I tap in and just get in touch with the land, what's happening here, and developing, continuing to develop that relationship.
Yeah.
And when people come to the retreat, they realize, man, this land is very sacred land.
Yeah.
So as the present custodian, I feel like I've got a responsibility to nurture it and commune with it, and just stay in touch each day.
Yeah, beautiful. It is a pretty special part of the world. I've been up here about 7 years, I think, and I can't imagine myself going anywhere else. It's kind of got that hold on me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Have you surfed your whole life? Just
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one thing. I grew up not really able to swim, not near the ocean, nothing. Culturally, it just wasn't. It's too cold in Wales. But yeah, it's been a big part of my life these days. Yeah, I do get a slight bit of envy when I hear people that grew up surfing and that, and I'm like, wow, what a trip.
I think that's one of the greatest blessings, to be born a surfer. Incredible.
Massively. And most people I know that surf are pretty chilled out as well. They kind of, they live more in the moment, without a doubt.
Yeah, it's a beautiful culture. There's so much to be said for it, because you're connecting with the ocean, which is beautiful, and all the animals in the ocean, the dolphins, the turtles. I mean, a couple of sharks every now and again, and it can be a spiritual practice, because surfing, you have to really harmonize yourself. You have to like read a wave. You have to learn flow, and you have to learn movement and how to adapt. And when you go into the surf, it can be like peak hour traffic. There's a lot of other people wanting to catch the waves, and it can turn into a real shit show. And the energy when there's conflict in the water just spoils the experience. So as surfers, you have to learn to like read other people, and you also, it can be a really soulful pursuit, and often there'll be great waves with a lot of people out, or there'll be crappy waves with no one. And most people, if they're honest, they'll say, I prefer to surf the crap waves. Just because when there's a lot of people, it taints the experience. It loses its like its ease, its grace, its pleasure, and its the naturalness. It becomes like a frenzy.
Cool.
So surfers, most surfers are really soulful. They want to have like a really unifying experience when they get into the ocean. It's where you leave the world behind, you go and you play and you have fun. So I feel it's like how I have the most fun and exercise at the same time. It's incredible, like, because it's not always those two things are united.
Yeah, no,
So
absolutely.
the most pleasurable thing is the most healthful thing.
Yeah, it's funny you say all that, because reflecting on my journey of learning to surf, like I've got a longboard now and I can hop up and ride across a wave. Nothing exactly flash, but it's one of the few things that make me feel like a kid. When I catch that wave and I light up and this, but it's been hugely challenging, like you say, overcoming the people and the crowds, and it really makes me think about myself and how I'm behaving and where my confidence lies, and like you say, having to deal and work with other people and not get caught up in it all. That, I think that was the biggest challenge for me, not actually learning to surf, but overcoming the crowds and working with people when you're out there was something I just didn't expect.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem with surfing. It's just that there's a finite number of waves that come through, and a lot of people in the water, and so it does at times feel like you're having to fight and hustle for waves, and it takes completely away from the experience for me anyway.
Yeah.
But it's just part of it. So yeah, you just go. That's why surfers go on the quest, and they travel to the far reaches of the earth. Travel for miles and miles and miles, getting multiple planes and boats and cars, and then like, okay, here I am on this outer, reef and surfing these waves in the middle of nowhere. It's just such a wild pursuit. We're very adventurous people.
Yeah, for sure. Fantastic.
Yeah.
What has there been a book that's made an impact on your life?
There's been a lot of them. Yeah, there's been a ton of them. I guess the first one, Autobiography of a Yogi, was certainly a major influence. I think Way of the Peaceful Warrior came next. These were real game changers for me when I was younger. And then, the Bhagavad Gita is a beautiful work. There's been a lot. I've recently enjoyed The Untethered Soul. I thought that was really beautiful. Yeah,
Michael Singer.
and also, Michael Singer, and then The Surrender Experiment.
Yeah.
It was kind of very much his journey. Like I would gone through Soma and everything that transpired to make that happen, and I was hearing his journal, like, oh my God, there's so many parallels.
Of course, yeah.
And what really struck me was just how he was just practicing surrendering to life. And that's kind of my philosophy, as I was mentioning earlier. Just what's happening in me, what's happening outside of me, and what's life cueing me to do. And so just mastering that dialogue, mastering that ability to listen.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think those books are really that reinforce that for people. And there's I think I'm very Vedic in what books touch me.
Okay.
So it's mostly things to do with the ancient wisdom.
Yeah, fair enough. No, they'll all, anyone listening to this, they'll all be in the show notes as well, so people can dive back if they want to check any of them out. Yeah, great reads. And last question, with everything we've covered today, which has been quite a lot actually, what would you like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
I would like people to learn to think critically. Would be one thing, especially at this time. That would be my big thing, because that's the reason people end up in trouble. When they lose their powers of discernment, their ability to critically think, to question things, and to trust their own innate wisdom and not allow themselves to be dictated to by a power outside of themselves.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you believe in something, stand for it.
Fantastic. If people want to find out more about you, Gary, where can we send them?
They could, I guess, follow me on Instagram, Gary Gorrow, or follow Soma, which is also on Instagram, soma.byron. That's probably the best two places to get in touch. And even on the Soma website, somabyron.com.au, join the newsletter. They can also come and learn to meditate with me or do any of the retreats at Soma. So that would be the best space to interact.
Fantastic. And do you have a podcast as well?
Yeah, the Soma Collective
Right.
podcast.
Yeah. We'll stick that in the show notes as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Gary, thank you so much for giving me your time and coming on the show today. I've been glued, mate. It's been fantastic. And there's so many things I didn't even touch on. It just organically went in its own direction. But appreciate you sharing your wisdom for everyone, all of us here today, and everything that you do in the world.
Yeah. Thank you too, man. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
You're welcome, Gary. Thank you.